There are lots of fundamentals and general rules of thumb when it comes to compositions that you'll learn from school and other artists, but only sticking by them can become formulaic and uninteresting. Over time, you'll learn how to harness common mistakes in basic composition to create more original and unique decisions for your compositions. This is how we create advanced compositions. If you're not too familiar with composition itself, make sure you check out part 1 of this series, link in the description, but make sure you stick to the end to see how I bend the rules a little to create more intentional and story-driven compositions with my own characters. As we should probably know, a composition is our entire piece. It is the piece as a whole, right? A successful composition, right? When somebody says like, oh, this is a very successful composition, should convey some kind of emotion, not necessarily a meaning. I think that the biggest misconception that a lot of artists, whether they're fine artists or not, like industry artists, one of the two, right? They go like, oh, art doesn't always have to have meaning. It doesn't always have to like mean something really deep. It doesn't always have to be, of course it doesn't. But it should always make you feel something, right? You look at a composition, you look at somebody's artwork, most of the time you're going to look at it and you're going to sort of understand the emotion that the artist might be wanting to portray. Even if it's something as simple as, oh, this character is really cute. I think that they're adorable. I think that this is making me like happy, right? So there's not necessarily a meaning behind the artwork that you're conveying, but there are varying ways that we can add emotion behind our work. A feeling in the work that we create. There are 2 ways that can really help enhance these emotional compositions, and that is space and balance. Right? Space and balance are 2 of the things that we want to focus on. Space, first of all, if we think of positive and negative space, say if we have got like a main character in like a forest, right? Our positive space is the character that we have in this forest. Our negative space is the forest around them. Or again, even simpler, if you're doing like a pose study, right? The person that you are illustrating is your positive space. Everything else around them is your negative space, right? It doesn't necessarily always have to be a person, but it is essentially how your main focal point looks against the background. Positive and negative space. And then space is also controlling how a viewer's eyes move on the canvas. So for example, a really, really popular example that a lot of people do when they're like, oh, I'm controlling how a viewer's eyes move across the canvas, right? You'll have like one person like walking on a road, right? And the road points towards a castle in the distance, right? You first probably will see, because people tend to be one of the first things we see, you'll probably see that person walking on that road first, and then your eyes will follow that road and then end up at that castle, right? Leading lines. Words, comics, right? Using those like speech bubbles to get around, or like if you've got a title somewhere, if you got something along those lines, right? Words, you can use those really interesting in really interesting ways to lead your eyes around the canvas. And focal points. You don't necessarily only have to have one focal point, you can have a bunch, but more often than not, it tends to be 1 or 2, right? It's the first thing your eyes go to on the composition, right? And there's lots of different ways you can have focal points be more visible and be the first things that you see, right? But if you have more than one focal point, then you got to make sure that that hierarchy is clear. That's not what we're going to be talking about today, perhaps in the future. And balance, from space and balance. Balance is controlling visual weighting. Now, visual weighting is one of those things that is very, very hard to teach, because it's something that you kind of feel as you work more and more with composition. The best way that I can describe the first one is that heavier areas have more focus, right? If there's an area on your composition that feels heavier, then it will have more focus. This one dot in the center, right, feels a lot heavier because it has the highest contrast in this entire thing, right? You've got a lot of like these circles going around, right? But this red dot is the one that sticks out the most. It is the heaviest in this composition. Therefore, it has a little bit more focus drawn onto it. Kind of hard to describe balance, but most of the time we are told to use space and balance, right? Space is one of those things where you want to make sure that your space is balanced, and vice versa. You want to make sure that you have enough space within your balance. They work together to create a very satisfying composition. However, when we work with something a little bit more advanced, breaking our rules tends to be more interesting. And that's something that I don't ever tell people first. It's one of those things where people will hear, oh, I can just break the rules because it makes them more interesting, without understanding how the rules work first. The only time that you can break your rules is once you understand how they work and how you know to use them, right? If you want to level up your visual storytelling skills, download my free guide to comic composition, link in the description. There are lots of different ways where we can break every single one of these rules so long as we understand how they work in the first place, right? One of the biggest rules that every artist is told to never do ever is to create tangents. Tangents are areas of tension when things near perfectly align, right? Here's the problem with tangents is that tangents are one of the best ways where you can instill like tension. It's the best ways where you can instill the feeling of horror, the feeling of fear, the feeling of tense, like a tense emotion, right? Areas of tension are when things near perfectly align. The example that I always give is if you have like a tree up front, like in our foreground here. That's another thing you learn with composition: foreground, middle ground, background. Don't think I need to explain it. So if we have our main tree here, and if we have a road behind the tree, and then we have a car, and it's behind the tree, but the front of the car looks like it hits that tree, this is a tangent, right? That is a tangent. So the way that you would fix it would either to be move the car away so it doesn't touch the tree at all, or put the car behind the tree so it covers it like almost entirely, right? So it doesn't create that sort of tense feeling here, so it doesn't feel too perfectly aligned. However, when we are working with more interesting compositions, when we're working with a composition that's more advanced, we might actually want that. So other things you can create tangents with are the edges of your composition, the edges of the piece itself. Let's say we wanted to create something eerie. Let's say that I wanted to create like this composition where somebody is kind of like staring at you. But let's say we've got this person like looking directly at you, right? Not nice, not the greatest, right? Not the best to look at in terms of like him just kind of staring at you. But, right, technically, this is following our rules, right? It is going, okay, in our rules of composition. It's like, all right, we have our rule of thirds. It's kind of going down here, right? Our eyes sort of land on that first like quadrant. There's these lines of the first quadrant, right? Our character hits two of those focal point lines, right? We have our space filled in, stuff like that, right? Our focal point is really, really visual, right? This is fine. The rules are there for a reason. They're there as a guide. They're there to help us, right? But let's break some rules and make this feel more interesting. Let's say instead, if we had this guy way brighter, half his face is cut off like this. It's like a really, really heavy zoom in like this. Let's even do this. Let's have his face kind of in the corner here. Really, really cut off. So it's almost like he's looking up at us. So we've almost kind of got a perspective thing going on here. And let's even say that we decide I'm actually going to draw, or actually I'm going to have my eyes, like these eyes that we had here, cut off a little. We're gonna cause some tangents. We're gonna cause some tension kind of going on. If we have our eyes here, we're gonna have one pupil really, really close to that edge up here. We're gonna have the other one kind of going in a slightly different direction, but also sort of being cut off by the composition here. Now, if I was taking a bit more time on this, I probably would also blend these eyes out a lot more to really give it that effect. And then what we're also going to do, let's actually refocus this a little bit, because we kind of want this guy to be looking at us. Let's have the pupil be slightly a tangent with the edge of the composition. And then what we can also do is make that focal point slightly less noticeable. Lower that opacity a little bit on this black brush. Let me let this upper part fade just a smidge. Well, I said just a smidge and I made it fade a lot, but more like that. You know how many rules we just broke? This is so much better. We have tangents, a less visible focal point, and weird space, or no rule of thirds. Our two focal points are like in the corners. It's like if I was to split this up again into like that thirds, none of our focal points are on any of the rule of thirds. They're around here. Who knows? Our eyes are all the way up here. They don't even get close, right? This is so much better, right? And it's because we broke a bunch of rules. If you want to level up your visual storytelling skills, download my free guide to comic composition, link in the description. Let's say we're not going for something eerie. Let's try a different one. Want something hollow or empty? This one was playing around with balance. We're going to play around with space now. Let's say that we wanted something to feel almost like, you know, somebody's feeling kind of sad, or somebody's feeling, these are all these like really sad emotions, but it's like these are the easiest ones to show off these like rule breaky sort of things. Let's say that we've got a person, again, let's say that we've got them kind of, we're like, okay, we understand we don't have to use the rule of thirds, right? We don't really need to do that. I'm going to place this person directly in the center. Sure, let's do it. Let's say we've got this person directly in the center here, right? They're going to be sitting kind of with their knees up to their chest. He's sad. And let's say that I understand, I'm like, I need to make sure that I sort of fill in this space though, right? We can't leave it too empty, right? Because then that would be imbalanced. And this is fine. Again, this is completely fine. It follows the rules. However, let's make this feel hollower. Let's take this person and make them way smaller. Not only way smaller, but let's bring them like down here. It's like we can even leave them in the center, or we can bring them all the way down here. Doesn't that feel way emptier? This one's a really easy one, right? This one feels way better. You feel so much more hollower, so much more empty. And that's because you are visually portraying a feeling of emptiness. You're visually portraying the feeling of somebody being all on their own, right? And that really, really helps. That gives you that kind of strange sort of hollow sort of like empty sort of feeling, right? And that's what you want. So we're going to create a sense of poor spacing and a lack of visual balance to create that hollow or empty feeling. Let's do something that's not necessarily bad. Want some anticipation, right? Let's say we've got a bunch of people who are like waiting for an announcement of some kind. Let's say that they're waiting for like some kind of results on TV or whatever. We got to make sure that everyone in this fits in this composition and nobody really overtakes somebody else unless we intend to have somebody be our focal point, right? Drawing a group illustration is very, very complicated. It's more complicated than you might think to make it balanced because it's one of those things where you sort of have to give everybody a focal point. So people are always like, it's like, how do you do like really big group compositions? I'm like, I don't know, I just really enjoy it. I love big group compositions. Right, and then we have the TV here. Maybe this person's like the ringleader or something, I don't know. But maybe they're all waiting for something on the TV. Maybe they're waiting for somebody, like a winner to be announced or something. We get the idea, we get the picture, right? They're all waiting for something. They're all waiting in anticipation for something to happen. However, we can make this more tense. Kind of the opposite idea to what we had before. Let's make it so like it is cramped in here. Let's have all these people like smushing up against each other. How many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's have some of these people get cut off. Have some of these guys like try to like shove their way in through here, and even have the TV cut off most of them on the bottom here. And he's getting like smushed. This guy's pushing him out of the way. These two guys are pushing him out of the way. And now this feels crowded. It feels way too crowded, right? We've got a couple tangents with the eyes and the eyebrow up here, and like another eyebrow. There's an eye getting a tangent down here too, right? But this feels way more cramped. We are tense. We are like, oh my gosh, everything is so cramped in. Everything is so like tense in this moment. This is better. It's cramped space. There's also no clear focal point. Having no clear focal point also forces the viewer's eyes to bounce around. They have nowhere to land, essentially. So they have to constantly be moving around the composition instead of just, staring at the one thing. We have a cramped space, we have no clear focal point, right? And by breaking more rules, we create a more interesting composition, right? The more rules you break, the more interesting your work is gonna be, which is one of those weird things where people are like, oh, but like if I break the rules and it's all gonna be like, blah, 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 it's gonna be this, it's gonna be that, everybody told me to follow the rules all this time. And here's the thing, is that they're telling you to follow the rules because you need to know them before you can break them. Right? I understand what I'm doing in this moment. I understand what I'm doing here as well. And by understanding those sort of rules that we are breaking, by understanding the compositional choices that we make, it then creates an intentionally broken piece, which looks different by comparison to a piece that is unintentionally rule breaking, right? If you have a composition that is just generally poor and it wasn't because you decided to break some of the direct rules, but you instead didn't really know what you were doing, there's always a difference in that kind of compositional choice. Get more free art resources as well as critiques when you join our Art Nerd community on Discord. For this demo, I really wanted to do a composition I'd had in the back of my head for a while, and it was simple enough to do within class time, so I went with it. For those who have been in streams and my classes before, they know that Korn has a pretty rough and violent backstory, so I wanted to draw something relating back to that instead of the more cutesy stuff that I tend to do with him. In terms of actual composition, using some rule breaking, I wanted there to be two focal points. One that your eyes actually go to first, and then one where you get more context towards what's actually going on. Naturally, our eyes go to what has the highest contrast first, and in this case, it's Korn's face up at the top there, having the only source of white on the entire canvas. I wanted to use tangents and awkward positioning to almost tell the viewer, like, no, this is not what you should be paying attention to, keep on looking. And as your eyes naturally trail down to areas with less and less contrast, you notice that Korn's holding on to what seems to be an antler of some kind, and spoiler alert, that antler is in fact attached to a head. With Korn looking away from his kill, it almost gives a sense of disregard, like he's already forgotten the target he was chasing mere seconds ago. And with the compositional techniques, it's almost like I'm trying to tell you to disregard it just as much as he already has. Aside from the space and balance of the piece, I also decided to use the Gestalt principle closure, which states that the human brain prefers to perceive complete shapes, and will do so if enough context is given. I've used it in a couple of ways here. One, though I didn't draw in Korn's legs, you can assume he has them. And two, letting the red of the negative space bleed into the positive space, no pun intended. In that way, that also gives the viewers context into just how violent this scene actually is, and lets them see where I've chosen to splatter red around in a different context other than just lighting choice. Join a virtual class in seconds and learn live from professional artists. Enjoy weekly assignments, individual guidance, and real-time feedback on your artwork so you can create like a fearless illustrator. If you learned something new, please like and share this with a fellow art nerd. If you love receiving quality and free arts education, subscribe. Here's a couple other videos you can check out next.